listening to First Contact, Stories of the Call Center, a podcast brought to you by NobelBiz, your all-in-one contact center solution. Every month, our host, Christian Montes, talks to tech leaders and entrepreneurs who found their way into the contact center industry.
Hey everybody, super excited for the final episode of season 2. We got a great guest, great topic today. Super excited to finish off the year with knocking it out of the park. So look, for those of you, this is First Contact, Stories of the Call Center. And here's the topic for today. For those of you who don't know about lead generation, get ready because we're going to dive real deep into it. All right, not too deep, but we're going to definitely get into lead generation. Now, not other than that, we got a superstar here. Michael Feree, who is the CEO of Contact.io and Lead Generation World. And yes, he's also a host of a podcast, LGW Podcast. Super excited to have him on because look, we run into lead generation all the time in a lot of ways. And sometimes we don't always know the topic of exactly what it means in our business and how it impacts our business. So why not bring somebody with decades of experience who has, let's say, marketed, bought, sold, had been in performance marketing, and is just a very well-respected person in this space. So Michael, we're super excited to have you on. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Christian, and congratulations on the second season, man. That's a lot of work. I mean, people don't realize how much time and that goes into putting on these podcasts. So congratulations, man.
Hey, look, I've been blessed to be talking to a lot of people smarter than I and who have really good stories, which is awesome for our audience. Now, here's the big thing for me, though. There's people like you that have tons of episodes and other people that have like hundreds. And I sit there and go, man, I could barely survive what I'm doing with the ones we've done. So my hat's off to everybody else who actually really does this on a regular basis. But look, the theme on this podcast is starting off with what's your story? Because we always talk about the contact center space. That's our focus. But I don't think I've talked to very many people that go, hey, yeah, when I grow up, I'm going to be in the contact center space. That's always been the story here. So how did you even get into this space in the first place?
Yeah, I think the same applies to the lead generation industry too. And there's a lot of overlaps that we'll sort of talk about likely here with the contact center space and lead generation. But, you know, God, I want to try to keep this probably as short as possible. But I got into the lead gen industry because I was working at a marketing company. I was out of college. We did web design, all this sort of stuff. And there was a job opportunity at a mortgage and insurance company for a marketing manager, an analytics manager. And the person was supposed to oversee all the leads that the company was buying. And I really at the time had no idea what the heck that meant, but I knew what a lead was. I mean, we got them in on our website for web design. And so I went in there and told the guys, yeah, I know what leads are. And yeah, I know how to distribute them to the salespeople. I do that all the time. When a lead comes in, I forward off the email to the sales guy. And they hired me. And so I walk in on the first day, and now I'm responsible for 400 plus leads a day with 20 plus vendors. Really had no idea what I was doing. They sort of threw me into the fire, but I figured it out and realized that there's really a lot of challenges with buying leads. And then after a few years there, I went to the other side of the table and worked for an agency where we generated leads and worked with companies across multiple industries on driving inquiries to their website or creating them ourselves on our own properties and selling them to them. And then after that, I got into the contact center space because if you're buying leads, generally you have a sales team or a contact center reaching out to those leads. And then also inbound calls and all that sort of stuff. So I worked for a number of companies in the contact center space as well as it would pertain to sort of the lead gen performance marketing industry. So and then started Lead Generation World and Contact.io, two conferences sort of dedicated to to those two industries. So that's sort of the short story.
Well, a lot to unbox there. So let's kind of dive into that. Let's step a little bit back and let's talk about lead generation as a term. because a lot of people, when they think of lead generation, sometimes it's a role within a company. Sometimes it's a department within a business, right? But lead generation is an actual industry, and there's a lot involved in what we call lead generation from an industry perspective. Can you give us a little bit more behind the scenes for our audience and say, all right, in your world, what is this encompassing industry of lead generation? Who are the buyers? Who are the sellers? What is it? What is it you do? What's its purpose?
Yeah, and actually it is quite broad, because even now a new title coming out is growth marketing, and it's very similar to lead gen when it's really about building new customers, and generally that's what lead generation is from a performance standpoint, a mindset where you are working on either with third-party vendors or partnerships on driving traffic or calls, for that matter, on a per performance basis. So on a cost per action, and generally that action is a lead, or an inbound phone call, or a qualification of some sort. What I've sort of come to terms with is consent. So it's sort of consent marketing. It's driving individuals to raise their hand and say, "I give consent to call me," and that's sort of the lead gen aspect. But it gets pretty broad. I mean, it's really a performance based marketing approach versus a agency style where they're charging you a percentage based on spend versus not necessarily performance. So that's sort of lead gen holistically. A good example of a lead generation company, though, as an example, is most people know of LendingTree, and their marketing statement, which is, "When banks compete, you win." Well, some people may think that LendingTree is a bank. Well, they're not. They're a marketing company. They drive consumers to their website to search for mortgage rates. Those people fill out that form, and then they in turn sell that information to the banks. So you get your information will get sold to 3 different mortgage companies that will then call you and give you a quote on your remortgage or whatever it may be. That mechanism of LendingTree is sort of the lead gen marketplace, and that happens across hundreds of different industries and verticals.
So let's unwrap that a little bit further and overlay it with the contact center space, right? So there's some company somewhere that wants to be able to access more people to talk to and interact with to generate more business, right? Mm-hmm. And so some of that can be done internally, right? They have internal salespeople, their own lead gen people, their marketing, whatever, that's internal. But then there's also, you're saying, companies that create an ecosystem, a product or a service that front ends that experience for all the people that are out there. And then it takes that central place or places that they collect the consent from people. And then they either act on that or they distribute that to the people that want those people to interact with for their product or service, right? Am I taking this accurately so far?
Yeah. So when we look at just how contact centers interact with sort of the lead gen ecosystem and sort of separate it from sort of the customer service ecosystem, I think there are sort of really 2 buckets of contact centers. There's ones that are obviously owned by the brands themselves, right? So you have your internal contact center, sales team, and then you also have third-party contact centers that work on behalf of those brands, right? So they're either taking in inbound calls and then qualifying them and then transferring them into the sales team, or they're making those outbound calls on data that's being purchased, qualifying them and then transferring those calls into the salespeople. And so so as far as lead gen goes, a lot of times those contact centers need that data to transfer in. So it's either and there's all types of data, right? There's lists, which we don't call those leads in my, like, I don't call those leads when you're acquiring lists of individuals. Obviously they're probably not compliant. We'll just stay away from the compliant conversation at the moment, but if they're not raising their hand, and saying, I want a call about a mortgage, just to stay on that, example, that's not a lead. Now, is it, do they, is it a list of a title search that says, hey, these people's mortgages are going to be up in 3 months? Those aren't really leads. Those are sort of what do they call marketing, sales opportunities potentially, but they haven't raised their hand for you to call them.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we look at the contact center space, right, and obviously when we run into sales opportunities, lead generation, we talk about marketing generated leads and just lists that people dial on, right? The end result for them usually is one category is you're calling people that are expecting to hear from you, right? Or at least that's the idea, right? That they've had interest in your contact. Now, when and how you contact, that's a different question, and how often. And on the other end of it is people that you want to go after that don't necessarily need to talk to you because they've expressed interest, but they actually may have a need because of things like you mentioned. Their mortgage may be coming up and they're going to have to shop somewhere. They're going to have to look for something. Why not be you, so on and so forth. So there's those two categories. So let's overlay that with the contact center space. From your experience and your knowledge, what are the things that a contact center, internal or an outsourcer, have to do, both operationally and then technology-wise, to make sure that when you actually act on or generate these two different types of leads, and let's kind of work with leads on the list for the moment, what are some big things that companies, contact centers really have to take into account to be successful in those two, either generation of those and or acting on those and creating something positive out of it?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to individuals that are raising their hand and filling out a form, whether it's your website or a third-party vendor, the number one, factor in success is obviously speed to contact. It's something that's obviously really, really important. So as soon as that lead is, and this is why contact centers play such a significant role in being and helping brands be successful with leads, is because they have the capabilities generally, they have the technology stack, they have the things in place that allow them to successfully get a lead in and within seconds make that outbound phone call. There's stats out there that, and I'll botch the stats, but that you have a 10 times bigger chance of closing an individual in a sales call when you call it within 10 seconds of them filling out that form. And in a highly competitive environment like lead generation, and let's just continue on with mortgage, where 3 banks may be calling, it's extremely important that contact center is calling it immediately. And then now that we know, beyond that first call, that they have a proper dialing strategy beyond that call. They're utilizing text messaging, especially these days, assuming that we're still assuming this is all compliant and they've opted into this, but there's a text messaging component to it. And then that the obviously the training side of the CSRs understand what they're talking about, right? So it's all sort of basic stuff that all the contact centers generally do. But I would say that where people fall short with being successful with calling on, especially inbound real-time inquiries from a website, is that speed to contact, making sure that they're really picking up that phone and calling it as soon as they receive that data list or that data lead.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations around this topic, and the two things that have come up most recently, and I'd love to know your thoughts on it, is number one is the dynamic between, yes, speed is important, but does that person really expect your call right then and there? And
or do they even want it?
Yeah, right. And then the second thing is there anything encouraging or inhibiting them to take that call when you make that call? So in other words, does that call in 10 seconds or less come up as fraud or spam or scam? Does it have the name of the business that's calling or the bank? Does the call actually get blocked? Does it actually encourage them to go, yeah, this is who I wanted to talk to. I'm expecting this call, because it's not just a number from blah, blah, blah. It maybe has a name attached to it or a logo or whatever. Have you seen or experienced challenges in, even though you hit the speed, but there's something in between that's causing the consumer's experience to say yay or nay to taking that call in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You touched on a lot of different things, and I guess the first part is to if you're partnering with a third party vendor, a lead generation company to drive data into your call center or into your brand, that company, that vendor needs to be providing transparency to the consumer, meaning when they fill out this form, hey, you're going to get a phone call, speak to somebody in minutes, and then showing them, who's going to be calling them. Here are the companies that you've been matched with. Expect their call, and being transparent with the consumer. It doesn't work anymore. Where 10 years ago there was a lot less transparency in the process. Now there just has to be more. Consumers aren't picking up the phone from individuals that are not in their in their contact list already, right? If it doesn't say mom or sister, whatever, they're not picking up the phone, right? Unless they really are expecting a call. So you got to make sure that they're expecting that call. But then, now we're facing challenges with, spam blocking and ID, call blocking, all that sort of stuff, which is a big challenge for contact centers, to be whitelisted or white labeled and stir shaken now with spoofing phone numbers. I mean, it gets harder and harder to contact people by the phone. There's no question about that. I know a lot of contact centers, I'm sure you've talked about a lot on the podcast, are trying to figure out how to go about navigating that issue alone. But then here comes in text messaging, right? So text messaging is quite the opposite. Text messaging is sort of wide open these days as far as a regulatory standpoint. You can text message people, and if the communication level is there and they're opting into it on the form, I mean, that seems to be a really great way to go. Certainly that opens up a can of worms when it comes to training and implementing, how you go about implementing text messaging within a call center. Do you have a team? Is it based on just the agent alone doing it? Is it one-to-one? Is it automated? There's a lot of things, but there seems to be challenges here on calling, but then there's a opportunity for text and other channels to communicate with consumers.
Yeah,
right? And we got that omni-channel thing going.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting how the various channels really all drive you either towards a quick answer, a self-service answer, or another way to get you to a voice interaction without the pain that many, unfortunately, voice interactions can go if they don't have a proper journey for people. But with that said, to stick a little further onto the SMS side of it, let's say you're doing everything from the opt-in perspective, the compliance dots are all there. Are you saying that you've seen success in a call first, then a follow-up SMS, or an SMS first to confirm, like right after they submit the form saying, hey, you're going to get a call, and mark yes to take a call now or no, or any type of thing like that, where then they say yes and you just call them with that number? Or you just say, hey, you're going to be receiving a call within the next minute, be ready for a call, and then you call them. Have you seen or gotten feedback on the layering and dynamic of the order of things, and then how you're prepping people to be aware and ready for that conversation?
Yeah, I haven't seen what specifically when you're comparing A/B examples, what's working best. But I do know I've talked to a number of companies that are doing one of two things. One is they're sending out a text message at the same time, or right there before a call comes. It goes, hey, we got your inquiry about your mortgage. We're going to be calling you right now. Phone call goes out. And then hopefully from that same phone number. See, this is the tricky part is getting, the calls to, I think these days coming from a same phone number that they can recognize. And there's also ways to do this within email, and not to get off too much, but, in email response going out in real time, going into a phone that has that same phone number in the email that you're calling from will on some phones will recognize that number because it's in your database now on your phone, that'll go, hey, this could be,
Yeah,
XYZ mortgage
Siri is
company.
one example that does that. Looks at
Yeah.
past
Yeah. So
calls, emails.
yeah, so there's ways about going about it. But back to the text messaging, we see companies not fully giving up that speed to contact approach with a phone call, but pairing it with a text message as well, and just sending out the phone and the text message, hey, we're coming out. And whether that's been perfected on the timing yet, I don't know. But it certainly is coming to, I think, fruition that text messaging is a really good way to set up a phone call, to schedule it, or just tell them to call you when they're ready, which is okay. When I say that, I don't mean give up the idea of taking control of when you follow up and control and putting it all in the consumer's hand. That's not a good idea. But allowing them to have a little bit of control over, hey, yeah, call me at this time or whatever it may be. But I think I don't think that balance has been figured out, at least from my conversations, because no one's giving up that opportunity to call and call fast, because we know it's extremely important to get somebody on the phone. And I mean, let's not forget, we're talking about people that have raised their hand and said, I do want you to call me. So, it's a little bit different than, a cold call on a random Sunday afternoon and they filled out a form, 4 days ago. That's when you see contact rates go, in the can. That's why it's so important to make those contacts, within the first minute, within the first 5 minutes. And then every 10 minutes that lead gets old, the less likelihood of you getting a hold of that person is going to be.
This is James. James is a contact center manager with a passion for philosophy and hiking. As a kid, he made a promise to himself that he would always follow his passion. Today, he ponders on the thought that this promise is probably the best decision he ever made. Today, James loves his job just as much as he loves hiking. So much that he sometimes brings the scent of fresh pine and the tranquility of the mountain streams back to the office with him. With NobelBiz as his company's provider, James found the necessary peace of mind to finally bridge the gap between his passion and his work. By choosing to partner with the promise-keeping voice and software provider of the industry, contact center technical issues, downtime, and poor customer experience are now a thing of the past. In an industry ruled by uncertainty, NobelBiz combines balanced pricing with the highest quality, topped off with outstanding support. But above all, NobelBiz delivers peace of mind to contact center managers and owners. And for the first time, James hit that sweet spot of focus and confidence that is allowing him to take his business to new heights of profitability and success. After all, you know what they say, promises are the uniquely human way of ordering the future. NobelBiz, the promise keepers of the industry.
Yeah, so I think before we hop into the next topic, to really wrap that up nicely, is one, speed is hugely important. But the other part of it is it's not a one-trick pony, right? It's a multi-layer of tactics that are worked in unison to help meet that person where they want to be met, how they want to be met, so that conversation can happen sooner than later. Because the longer you take, the worse it's going to get for that opportunity to actually come to fruition. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you kind of made me think about one other thing that's been really interesting to see, contact centers and sales teams do. And it's sort of smart distribution of where those, who's calling on those leads and who's likely going to be more successful with closing or qualifying that lead. And now we're seeing, companies within their contact centers take not just sort of spray and pray kind of thing with their leads and just hope that whoever gets it can close it. But actually starting to go, well, listen, if this is a Medicare call from California, this should go to this group here. That understands that area, that know whatever it may be, or that age group, or if it's a refinance in Florida, it should go here. So I've seen contact centers and sales organizations start to be a lot more intelligent with not only their outbound strategy, but also who they distribute those leads to and who can communicate the best potential opportunity to that individual, which is also, I think, pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think getting the right person to the right place at the right time aligns with that, and using technology, people, and process to make it happen, I think in the right way can make a big difference. So let's kind of switch over to another topic. You're the CEO of Contact.io, and I know there was some new things that have come about with that because there was some pause there. I'd love to kind of dive into that. Yeah. And then lead generation world, right? What is the purpose of these two? Give us a little bit more insight into it, and what big things are exciting coming up going into 2022.
Yeah, definitely. So Lead Generation World is a conference that we just founded 2 years ago, and it focuses obviously on the lead generation industry, sort of full funnel. So that means, from the marketing standpoint, strategies on driving traffic, converting traffic into leads, and then subsequently closing those leads after they've been purchased. So we sort of bring the whole ecosystem together. That means lead generation companies, that means marketing agencies, that means the service providers in the middle, like a CRM or lead management system or call center platform. And then we also bring the brands as well. So the lead buyers get to come, and we have a lot of content for them around best practices on how to find good vendors, how to decipher good leads from bad leads, and then analytics and how to close them into sales. So that lead generation will sort of focuses on the whole industry. Contact.io was founded by my friend Jay Weintraub in 2016, I think it was, and he ran that show for 2 years, and then he also started another show. At the time, that other show got really, really popular. So unfortunately, Contact.io took a back seat, but it was a really popular show then, and it was popular because it really focused not just on contact strategies and customer service strategies, but also the call marketing aspect of it. And so we sort of brought back Contact.io. We acquired it from Jay and brought it back and relaunched it, and are really focusing sort of on the same objectives, which is bringing a new, fresh conference to the contact center space with just a different feel. We try to do a lot of fun things at our shows, integrate a lot of networking opportunities, have a really active exhibit hall and great content. But I would say that sort of difference between probably us and some other contact center shows is that we also integrate sort of the marketing aspect of it, because it's not always just about the contact center strategies, the outbound strategies or the inbound strategies, but it's also how do we also drive data and opportunities into those contact centers, and so we also talk a little bit about driving inbound calls from media campaigns, and also creating your own inquiries and driving them into your contact centers. So we add that to it. We're really excited about it. We had our last show last month in Denver, and had about 500 or so people there. We're looking at growing it further, and just excited to be back and sort of facilitating the contact center space.
Well, what's interesting is both of these don't sound like they've been around for a really long time, which means that the time that they've come to life have been really peaking, if not really heavily impacted one way or the other by the pandemic, right? We're going on 2 years here. And for somebody who now not only is the CEO of these two companies, but you had to have seen very specific things on how you had to evolve or actually make these events worthwhile. How did it impact you when the pandemic hit, up to how does that change, if anything, what you're doing at your events and how you're going to go forward?
Yeah, we sort of glazed over the part at the beginning when, I never was an event person. I
Wait,
was a
what? Your
Legion
whole
guy.
life?
Yeah.
I thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's what you wanted to grow up to be.
Yeah, that's right. I was a lead. I'm a marketing guy. I'm a lead gen guy. I'm a relationship guy, and you know, I had a passion for helping companies sort of navigate the lead gen ecosystem, and was involved with a few shows, but never intimately involved in the operation side of it. And there came a point in 2019 where I really wanted to bring back a show that's by an industry professional and for the industry. And that's where Lead Generation World came out of. And we started, our first show was January 2020, 2 months before the pandemic. So we were able to, have a successful show and get it off the ground right before everything sort of hit the fan. But it was challenging, through that year, trying to figure out how are we going to navigate this, and we had to push things off and do things different. And the same thing goes for Contact.io. Listen, I've worked at two contact center spaces, that's business development, and I'm an industry guy, so to speak. I've worked with a number of brands on their contact strategies, helping them build efficient call centers, and working with the lead gen sort of ecosystem to be successful. And so we take the same approach with Contact.io that we do with Lead Generation World, which is what would I want? What would we want from a show, being industry players ourselves? What would we want? Because I feel like, to be honest with you, and this is why we started the conferences, because I feel like there's a lot of shows out there that are run by event people, and they're marvelous at putting on events, but sometimes they're just a little detached from the industry as a whole, and they don't really understand what content really works, and what it's like to actually be an exhibitor, and what it's like to have pay a lot of money to be in an exhibit hall that's empty, and so we take the approach of what would we want when we show up and we pay $500 or $800 for an event, or $1,000 to exhibit. What do we want in return from that? And that's sort of our approach on both of those events as we take it. But yeah, it's never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be managing events, especially through a pandemic. But we're doing it, and it's everything's working out just fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And the other part, considering I've been a participant at a lot of events and I've been a vendor at events, I will say that there are a lot of times in which the audience that the event is catering to definitely seems to exclude the vendors. It's like you're there, your money goes into it, but you're really not the reason why people go to these events. And it's like, okay, well then find the money elsewhere.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. And that's why, with all our shows, we try to make the exhibit hall the center of the show. Listen, a booth, whether it's $3,000 or $10,000, whatever, by the way, we don't sell booths for $10,000, but I'm just talking in general,
oh yeah, they're that much or more.
Yeah, but there are shows that charge that much for large booths and all this. And not only that, you're shipping everything out there. You're having to have the booth cost. It's very expensive. And so for a show not to consider you the center of its business and its show is downright disrespectful, frankly. And so I think we have our exhibit hall always has things happening in the middle of it, and it's open, and we try to drive as much action as we can into that exhibit hall. In fact, we make people walk to the sessions through the exhibit hall floor in most cases, depending on the layout of the venue. But yeah, it doesn't, those sorts of things are reasons why we do things a little different at the show, and hopefully people get more value out of every dollar they put into the, investing in attending a show. But yeah, that's our outlook. I mean, we take the approach that, what would we want when we're spending money on being an exhibitor or sponsor at a show?
Yeah, I think that's critically important, but we don't want to forget that the people that are the attendees need to get value from that show. And that value has to not only align with the content, the things that the show is doing, but the vendors also have their part. The vendors have to provide value. They have to be able to give an environment that's conducive to people wanting to engage in conversation and feeling that when they leave that they're better off than when they came. And so I don't want to just put it on that, well, the vendors pay a lot of money to show up, so give us all the attention. At the end of the day, yes, it's an investment, but the flip side is you're also there to do good work. You're there to service the audience that's there, that hopefully if you earn it, they become your customer. And so I think that same thing applies, though, that while you're there as a vendor, as a participant as well in that experience, that everyone's on the same page of what everyone's part is, so that that whole show is not only successful for the event coordinators, but for the attendees and the vendors that go and pay a lot of money to show up. So I'll leave it there, but I think it's great that that's the focus you're coming from. That's the approach you envision for how these three different distinct groups can now have their money better spent, right? And time, of course, which is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're so excited about contact.io. Next year, we're already, discussing content and bringing on, experts and just making it better than it was last year. This last month, we're struggling with, some companies that couldn't attend due to restrictions and, due to the pandemic. But we're excited for next year. And if you don't mind, anybody listening that wants to be involved from a, speaking standpoint, that, we'd love to have experts really share actionable information. I think that's a key to a successful show. Not companies that want to get up there and do a demo of their product. No, we don't do that. But we really want people that have a passion for this industry, the contact center industry, and want to share their expertise and help companies and help brands be successful. Because I have a real core belief that if contact centers and brands can be successful, then this whole industry can continue to grow. Companies like NobelBiz can continue to grow and expand if the companies have the right tools and the right expertise to be successful. And so I think that's where contact center comes in and trying to facilitate that. And any individual that wants to participate in that mission, hopefully they can reach out to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the audience we have has a lot of knowledge, right? You have people that have just worked their way up. They own businesses, run businesses. They're in the trenches all the time. They're the heroes of the pandemic from the perspective. They were the frontline workers in many ways in a lot of these contact centers. And a lot of people do mission critical work. And a lot of the stuff in the lead generation world, some of these things are really important for people, right? You're signing up for something that could be impactful, meaningful in your life, and having that good communication is important. So for companies to attend contact.io and lead generation world, what are the things that you do to get the organizations, the people, not the vendors, but the people that actually show up? I mean, that's got to be a big job. So what is it that you do outside of saying, hey, we're different, we're doing all these different things? How have you gone about getting 500 people to that first show or this last show?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about what we do moving forward, because this last event was great. We sort of just did our normal launch of a show. But what we do and we'll do for contact.io next year is we do set aside, hundreds of free passes to brands. For like lead generation, we're coming up in January. We set aside $100,000 worth of free passes to qualified brands and lead buyers. We'll do the same thing for contact.io. We'll set aside, 100 passes for brands that are looking for contact center services. And I'm talking about, any brand that is looking for those types of services. We try to get them there to help provide them with a low cost opportunity to come to a conference and get in touch with qualified and really good businesses. So that's one thing. I mean, You can call it charity, call it whatever you want, but we really believe, again, that if those brands have those tools, this whole industry will grow, and that means the conference will grow, and that means the NobelBiz platforms will grow, and all we'll continue to build on top of it. So I think it's an investment in the industry as a whole, is the way I look at it. But yeah. We'll continue to put out as much best practices as we can, and hopefully bring on expertise throughout building up to the show, and provide those opportunities for brands to come to the show at no cost or low cost. And we hope that's the what will work, and hopefully people will follow our passion for helping this industry grow.
So, when you said during the pandemic, you had a show right before it hit, right? And you said you just had a show. I know there was a huge trend in the event space where everyone pivoted to online.
Yeah.
Some were very, very difficult, to say the least. I'll call it you might as well just burnt your money, right?
Yes.
Participating. And then there was others that found creative ways to make it more palatable. Have you entertained online? Have you done online? Have you thought it's just not for you? What are your thoughts on that aspect of it?
Well, I agree with your first statement, is generally that it's just not a value. It doesn't provide the same value that an in-person show would do, and to associate costs similar to an in-person show to a online, a virtual show is just doesn't make sense. Most people went to a free model, which is fine, but then it kind of goes back to the sponsors and vendors. Are they getting the value out of it that they put the money into if they're supporting this event? At the end of the day, I just don't find that it provides the value that's needed for all parties. So we generally just don't do them virtual. We did a free one in May of 2020 after things started, but it was purely an experiment, and it's purely just to provide some type of content for it. But I think there's a lot of great content out there. The podcasts like this, there's ongoing webinars that you can get that are free, and to put those all into a 2-day event and masquerade it as a conference, I don't personally think there's a whole lot of value in it. But I will say there are some companies that do it phenomenally, and it's actually quite costly. Some of these platforms where you're walking around the exhibit hall, you're running into, you can hear people talking. There's some really, really cool things out there. I just think the good news is that I think that time is passing us, and the value of in-person conversations is I think even more realized today than it was, pre-pandemic. And now, people do realize the value of face-to-face interactions and getting in front of people and talking with people, and that value in creating partnerships, real partnerships with people is important. I mean, we had a trouble, but I mean, bringing it back to the contact center space, what a whirlwind that was for so many contact centers having to, go remote, and figuring that all out within weeks time. And I mean, that was insane for a lot of the companies that are listening to when we had our struggles, but that's a whole other, these contact centers that had to move hundreds of people remote and figure out how to, monitor and continue to train and all these sorts of things was, quite a challenge. And so for them to hear me talk about this is probably silly, considering what all they've gone through.
Yeah. Well, I think every person has their own struggle, right? In their own life, what things that they go through. So what's difficult for one may or may not be for another. But I think what it really taught us, though, for those of us that want to talk about it versus just the ones that we say this is our story. One, it was disruptive, right? It forced change, and change that some of us learned from, and we appreciated things like, hey, what's the size of my house? How do I work from home, right? How do I do this or do that with not being able to commute anymore, right? I can't get public transportation. I can't go find food, or, hey, my job, I'm out of work, right? On the flip side, there's been a lot of innovation, a lot of adoption of things that people were like, I'm not doing that. And then now they're like, I have no choice. I have to do it. Right. So there's this idea where I think there's been a lot of people that their industries have been disrupted. A lot of people that have become entrepreneurs. A lot of people have left the job market. But there's also a lot of people who have been open to change, doing something different, right? And I see you're doing something different. So I think there's still going to be a lot of positive that comes out of some things that are horrible and tragic and damaging in many ways. And so those of us that were lucky and didn't have it as bad as others, I think we can obviously reflect and find out how we can do better and do more. So as one of the shifts, I know one of the topics I wanted to cover was LGW jobs. Can you give me some insights and feedback on what that is and what's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a recruiting arm, and basically, we sort of consider ourselves connectors in the industry, anyways. We bring people together in the conference. For many years, I ran an association called the Leads Council. It's now called the Consumer Consent Council as of a couple days ago. But it was, people would always come to me and go, hey, I'm looking for somebody to hire, because it is sometimes tricky to find people specifically with lead generation experience and understanding performance marketing and all those aspects. And same in the contact space. But they would come to me, hey, do you know anybody? I'm trying to hire. And yeah, I do. And so we just sort of formalized that process, and help companies find individuals. And more so help individuals find companies to work for. And, it just sort of follows along the lines of helping people navigate this industry one way or the other and connecting people together. It's an interesting thing that's sort of come about in my life is just the sort of passion for bringing people together and connecting and helping. And I think that, that's sort of how that came about was sort of doing the recruiting thing and helping just connecting companies and people together.
Well, sounds like you found a need and you started plugging in what you already had into play to make that a need that you could help serve. And so I think it all comes together that the idea here is you have expertise in this field, in this arena. How do your events, how do these different conduits working with one another actually help companies do better and do good work? So with that said, this is the part of the show we get to a little bit of personal stuff. So, I mean, I know you live and breathe lead generation, but what do you do on your off time? What do you do to decompress? What do you do to do something different than what lead generation drives your day to day?
Well, I've got two kids. One just got shipped off to LSU college. So we're down one here at the house. The other one is a 15-year-old, soccer player. So it has to do a lot of my free time still has to do with him and shipping him, all around for soccer games. But even more specifically, I live in San Diego, so I'm blessed to be able to have relatively good weather most of the day. So we like to go outside, like to go for runs. I used to do some Ironmans and that sort of stuff. So I've just continued to run and be outside. I think it's just good, not only physically, but also mentally, to be able to get outside and at least for an hour a day, do some level of activity outside. So that's sort of it, business keeps me busy, but I try my best to balance, personal and business together and appropriately. And so, yeah, I try to carve out some time to get outside every day.
Well, that's good. And obviously being in San Diego, it's not a tough place to be. I actually grew up in San Diego.
Oh, cool.
I just left San Diego in February.
I'm sorry.
Look, it's very expensive in San Diego. Food is fantastic in San Diego. I grew up in Cardiff, or for those of you who know the area, Cardiff by the sea. Yeah. Believe it or not, my grandmother's 105 this year. And my family's been in San Diego and actually in Encinitas for a long, long time. So some cool stories. We'll have to connect some point.
So Rob Machado and all those guys. And
Oh
all
yeah,
the
his brother was the baseball coach and history coach at my high school.
That's awesome.
You know a lot of those people, a lot of family, a lot of long-term history there. So it's a really neat place to live. A lot of good food, but also very expensive.
I was going to say, I'm always happy about living in San Diego until I look at my bank account. Yeah, that's usually how it goes. But
yeah, no, definitely. But Colorado's treated me really well, and even though it's a lot colder here,
beautiful.
It's a very beautiful state. A lot of cool stuff to do outdoors, and it's definitely a less long flight whenever I need to go somewhere on the East Coast for sure. But with that said, we've definitely had a great time having you on, giving us some insight into your world of lead generation, and obviously some great conversation around how that overlaps with the contact center space. But look, there's tons of people, I guarantee you, that are going to be like, I want to talk to Michael. I want to sync up with him. I want to know more. I want to interact with his shows. How do they find you? How do they connect with you? And obviously any of the events and things that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, they multiple ways. We have contact.io, which is the website. They can go there and there's a contact form that'll go to us, or you can just email me at mike@contact.io. And I'm on LinkedIn, Michael Ferree. Connect with me. You can shoot me an email. Very responsive, and I love to connect with people and just talk shop. So if you want to do that, I'm always available.
Or if you visit San Diego, you might run into him on that moment. He takes some free time to go outside. So, all right, everybody. That wraps season 2 of First Contact Stories of the Call Center. Look, at the end of the season, we always ask for your opinion. We ask for your feedback, good and bad, and obviously great suggestions for guests. So please, if you can go to info@nobelbiz.com and give us that feedback, give us those comments. And of course, any guests you think we should have on, we'd really appreciate it. Other than that, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your year. Looking forward to connecting with you next season.